Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Gosh, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. That last sentence of my introduction, that this is a place that I'm giving you permission to not have it all together, applies so much to my life right now. And I think if you're a mom, probably to your life as well. This podcast today is going to be something I've never done before, and I know that it is exactly the way God orchestrated for it to be for today. And let me explain to you why. A couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine and a fellow podcaster reached out and said that as she was praying about her podcast and who she was going to interview, she felt very strongly about the fact that God was laying me on her heart as who was going to be her next interview. But she pushed back a little bit because she said, God, that doesn't seem fair. She's in the middle of grieving her parents, and how could I ask her to talk about that? And he pushed back in all his godly ways and said, that is exactly why I would like for you to interview her, because everybody's in the middle of something. And I really believe that God used that moment with her as a reminder to her and to me, and I hope it's a reminder to you that we're all going through something, and something that I have preached on this podcast, and it's the reason why I do it, is because nobody likes to feel alone. And so when we share our hard stories, even when we're in the middle of the hard story, and even if we don't have it all figured out, it matters. There's purpose behind it. There's somebody else maybe listening that needs to feel just less alone in whatever they're struggling with. And so when my friend called me and told me what her conversation with God was, I knew without hesitation that I was to say yes. I knew that the conversation would be hard, but it also would be safe, because this is a friend who has prayed for me and I knew would honor this story with just great tenderness. And so today I invited her to my home. We sat down together. And so for the first time on the Mom Show, I'm not interviewing someone else. I'm being interviewed by my sweet friend, Cassie Schotanus. I really can't think of a better way to honor my mother and father than to not just tell the story of what's happened over the last 6 months, but to really shine a light on what God has done over the last 6 months. And so, without further ado, here is my conversation with Cassie being interviewed, sharing all about my mom and my daddy. I hope you enjoy.
Hey, Courtney.
Hello, Cassie.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back.
Yes, and I'm at her house, which I was just saying that it's really, truly an oasis out here. I love your property, love your home. So grateful to be out here.
Thanks.
And when I was praying about who should be on the podcast, the Lord put Courtney in my mind right away. And I kind of fought him back on it a little bit because you're in the middle of grief. You lost your dad less than 6 months ago. You lost your mom 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Lord, I almost feel wrong asking her to be on in the middle of her grief. And he said, that's why I want her to be on, because people are grieving and I want her to share in the middle of it. So I asked you and you gave me a resounding yes.
Look, if I know anything about you, Cassie, because we're close enough, is that number one, God speaks to you very clearly. Number two, you listen. And so we have had enough interactions at this point that, and I think I told you this when you asked me, I was like, oh, wait, Cassie, if God told you and you asked, it has to be a yes.
You did
There's
say
no
that.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for
course.
saying yes. You listened to him as well. And so I just appreciate that. And so before you get into it, I want to say that I was so excited to have gone back to Africa and had you and your family there. It had been 7 years since I went. In October, we went to Uganda with the Vine,
Yeah.
and you and part of your family went. And that was so, I think, fun, first of all, but just life-changing.
Yeah. Yeah. It was incredible.
I remember you talking about your parents even then, and they were healthy. Your mom has
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, but their passing was unexpected
Yeah.
for both. So I'm just going to hand the mic to you and let you tell your story.
And it's funny that you mentioned Uganda because my daddy, I don't know if you remember me saying this, was 100% against me going to Uganda.
He was.
Like angry that I would consider it. And he had all these theories. This is going to happen. And what if this happens? And what if Ukraine invades? And I'm like, what in the world? We probably got in one of our biggest father-daughter battles over me going to Uganda and me bringing the kids. We only brought 2 of the 6, our oldest daughter and then our youngest son. And he was very much, what are they going to see? And what are they going to remember? And it was that was unfamiliar for my dad. And he, in his elder years, was very much a Fox News watcher. And he would get, actually, not even Fox News, he would get on YouTube News and he would just watch all these conspiracies and things like that. And he genuinely did not fully understand my faith in going. My biggest fear was the flight because I don't love to fly. You know that about me. But I never really thought about being in danger in Uganda. And we certainly weren't.
We weren't in danger. And I just remembered, as you mentioned the flight, Courtney and her husband are the cutest people to fly with. They snuggle with each other. On the majority of that flight, I took a picture of Scott cuddled up on you. And y'all did amazing with all of the delays. We had like hours delayed, remember, before we even took off?
Yes.
But by that point, your dad had come around.
He had. He was angry for the weeks leading up. And look, my dad had very strong opinions. He was a very strong man and he didn't mince words on how he felt about things. And so it wasn't the first time that Daddy and I had gone toe to toe around faith, around religion, things like that. Some of my deepest conversations were with him about what I believed, what he believed. And at the core of it, we didn't believe anything really different. We believed the same thing. I was raised in one particular religion. And oddly enough, my dad had converted to that religion to marry my mother.
Wow.
And so my dad was raised Protestant. He converted to Catholicism to marry my mom. My mom was raised Catholic by nuns and things like that. And we were then raised Catholic. And then as an adult, we left the Catholic Church. Oh, man. You talk about fire and brimstone. Like, Daddy was not having it. And it was neither was my mother. It was probably a 2-year battle about church. And so anyway, it wasn't the first time that Daddy and I didn't see eye to eye on something. But he raised me to be very much like him, very strong, very opinionated. And every now and then I'd have to call a sister and say, hey, you need to intervene because I'm not even going to take his calls. I'm not arguing with you about Uganda. But at the core of it, he was just worried. Daddy was a worrier and he worried until probably the hours prior to his passing. He worried about us. He worried about my mom. He just never could not worry. And so that's what it was. He was just worried about us. And prior to us leaving, though, we had resolved any conflict on us going. And he was grateful and then loved hearing all the stories once we got back.
Did he? I was going to ask.
Yeah.
So y'all got to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was like, Daddy, this is what we did, and showed him pictures. And yeah, I'm so proud. Then it was like once he knew we were safe, and the minute we landed, in every step of the way getting to Uganda, I was texting my sisters and saying, hey, let him know. Because I knew at that point, he wasn't really texting a whole lot. And when he did, it was like really large words, and he would send it with slam effect and things like that. And so I wanted to make sure he was updated. So my sisters updated him every step of the way.
And was he your mom's primary caretaker as she had Alzheimer's, or did
Yes.
they live in a facility?
No, he was until he couldn't anymore. It was getting to the point that it was a little dangerous. She was wanting to walk out and things like that. And he had strokes starting all the way back. I think Daddy's first stroke was 13 years ago because I was pregnant for Hamilton. And so he had multiple back to back. And the last one had left him a little weak on the left side. His left arm and his left leg were a little weaker. And so he couldn't move as fast. He could still get around because he had a walker. But Mama always could move fast. She was always physically so healthy. And so when she started walking out, it got dangerous because
Yeah.
he couldn't catch her. And so then we were like, hey, y'all need to be in some sort of facility. And so they were living in a townhome actually when the hurricanes hit in Lake Charles, and they had evacuated to us, and then they lost their home. And so it was a really good excuse at that point to say, hey, y'all need to be somewhere. And I think them living in our home for that period of time, it was a lot easier to really see the day-to-day struggles that my mother was having that you could not see if you didn't live with them. You know, we
Mhm.
began to realize that the Alzheimer's had taken a toll on not just her memory, but on understanding of what things were. And like a toilet, for instance, she felt like my jacuzzi bathtub in the house that we were living in at the time. Think about it. It's oval, it's white. Her perception was that was a toilet. And so when we realized what she was doing, I was like, this is dangerous. She's going to sit on the edge of this bathtub and fall in and kill herself. She'd have fallen backwards and hit the tub. And so it was things like that. She couldn't, no longer could we just give her direction of walk straight, take a left, and there's the restroom, like our half bath. And so it became very evident with them living in our home that he absolutely needed more help. And look, my mom had babied my dad. He was the baby of 8 siblings. And so his daddy died whenever he was 10 or 13. I don't remember because oddly enough, Scott's daddy's dad died around the same age, like both of our grandparents. And anyway, it was just my grandmother and these 8 children. And my dad was the baby of 8. And he had all these sisters that doted over him. Baby Jack is what they called him. And then he marries my mom. And my mom wants nothing more than to be a mom, and so she's happy to mother him too. And daddy, every morning when daddy woke up, he went and sat in his recliner and put his feet up, and my mama served him coffee and breakfast, and then he'd go change and get ready to go to the office, and she used to come and grab me, and she'd use her finger, and she'd say, "Come see." And I was like, "Oh, what's mama gonna show me?" And she'd bring me and she'd point at the laundry basket, and she would point at my dad's clothes, and she would be like, "Your father cannot make the connection between the clothes on the floor that they go in the basket. And I just need somebody else to see that I'm not losing my mind, that this is not a hard task." And so, anyway, so she babied him very, very much. And then when he had the strokes, she really babied him. It became a disability for her as well, which probably did not help with the Alzheimer's because she was terrified to leave him. What if he has a stroke? What if I'm not there? If he falls from a stroke or something like that. And when her memory was gone, then daddy really didn't know how to shift from being cared for. And so we were like, "Daddy, you can't." He was bringing her, Cassie. It makes me laugh now, but he was still driving, and they would go to the store, and he would pull up to the front of the store and be like, "Go in, grab us our Cokes and our Oreos." They were, I'm talking middle 80s. And he's dropping her off in full out mode to wander around a store and to buy all the things that they need. Thank God they lived in a small town and a lot of people knew them. And so people started telling my sister, "Hey, Bridget, we saw your mom." And she seemed really confused. And we were like, "Daddy, you can't just drop her off at the store to do the grocery shopping." But he never fully grasped how poor her memory was
Mm.
because she never forgot him. So I think it was hard for him to see how much she was really forgetting because that connection between the 2 of them never faded.
That is so special. I love that you said that she never forgot him.
No,
And in their passing too, they passed months apart.
67 days.
Will you share that?
Yeah, so we got a call Thanksgiving week. Not even a call. My sister sent a text on like Saturday, and she was like, "Hey, dad, I brought dad to the doctor, the urgent care. He has a urinary tract infection," which was not uncommon. He had bladder cancer several years ago. And so the progression of that left him permanently catheterized. And so when you're permanently catheterized, infection is just really, it's just common often. And so sometimes they would get bad. We'd have to take him to an emergency room or an urgent care. They'd give him an IV antibiotic, and back home we went. And that was what Saturday was. And I woke up Sunday morning to a text from my sister, and she was like, "Hey, I've been at the place with daddy all day, all night. He's in a lot of pain. I think I'm going to bring him back to the emergency room." And I was like, "Yeah, I would." And that was the end of the discussion. There was no, "Oh, no, daddy's in the emergency room," kinda thing, and, they kept him, and on Monday, they were like, "Something else is going on." The doctor just was very inquisitive to, "Something's not right," and they think they could hear a little pneumonia, is what they said. "We hear a little pneumonia." Again, it wasn't uncommon. Daddy had broken his hip a year ago, January, I wanna say, and because of that, he was more bedridden at this point. And so he would get little small bouts of pneumonia from not being upright. And so anyway, so they're like, "We're gonna do some tests." The test revealed that the pneumonia was coming from him aspirating, and he was aspirating everything. Everything that went in his mouth was going into his lungs. And then they realized, they called us and said, actually, his own saliva. He's aspirating everything. It's just there's a flap that keeps things from going in your lungs versus into your stomach. And they said that would have to be surgically fixed. And what does that look like for a 90-year-old man? And then they started doing some heart tests, and they came back on Wednesday and told my sister that he had less than 20% heart function. And just 6 weeks prior, he had gone to the heart doctor, and everything checked out. He never had heart problems. When he had broken his hip, post hip break, he was having these dizzy episodes, and they realized it was like a heart arrhythmia. And so they did some things in medicine and things like that to get it all back level. And some of it was probably from the surgery and age and all of the factors. And so when they told my sister that his heart was functioning less than 20%, and the only thing at that point that was keeping him alive was the medicine, and they said the medicine that he's on will ultimately kill him, and he's too fragile. He'll die on an operating table. And we think he needs to be sent to hospice. So we went from Sunday morning to dad has a UTI, which is common, and oh, he's so silly getting back home, to Wednesday being told, you need to call a family because he needs to go to hospice. And once they send him to hospice, they turn any medication off. And so she called my sister and I Wednesday afternoon. I have a sister that lives in California. And of course, I'm in Texas. We were actually awaiting the arrival of a grandson. And so our daughter-in-law's water had broken on Tuesday night, and we were at their house waiting for her to go into active labor. And so my sister left California, and we had a baby Wednesday night at 10:30, and I got home and loaded up the rest of the family Thanksgiving morning. And we drove straight to Lake Charles to be with him. My sister arrived from California Friday morning, and then all the grandkids and everybody came in, and the hospital was so kind because the plan was Friday morning, as soon as my sister from California was in, they were moving him to hospice. And we knew what that meant. And then the doctor came in and she said, "Hey, I don't think he'll survive the ambulance ride. And I don't want this man to die in an ambulance." And she said, "Would y'all be okay if we kept him here? Y'all can have all the time that you need." He was in ICU, and normally there's like time restrictions. And they were like, "You're not restricted by the visitation schedule. You can have as many people in this room." And ICU rooms are normally really small. That was the first, I feel like, moment that I was like, God is so present in this moment, because this ICU room was really big. And we're a big family. I mean, just Scott and I alone, we're 8 people. And then I have 3 siblings and their spouses and their kids and grandkids. The only thing rule that they had was like nobody less than 10 could come in for health reasons. But
And your dad was talking up until
oh,
this point.
yeah, oh yeah. He was like, "When am I going home?" He was completely coherent. He had no idea what was happening. I say he had no idea. I think he did, but yeah, telling jokes. We sat around and he gave each one of the grandkids advice, and we asked him questions. The doctor that was helping us, like I said, she was so incredible, and she said, "Take all the video and ask all the questions." And
This
so
was Saturday, and he
this was
passed
Friday.
Friday.
Yeah, this was Friday. And a little before noon, Chandler's a nurse, our daughter, and the doctor had said, "You need to tell him what's going on." And Chandler was like, "Mom, you have to tell him." How do you look at somebody and tell them you're dying? This is it. And so We talked about it, the siblings, my sisters and brother. What are we going to do? And lunch came and we all went out to the waiting room. It was funny because right about the time that lunch came around, he was like, I'm tired. Y'all need to get out of here. I need to take a nap. And we all laughed. We were like, okay, we will leave. So we went in the waiting room and we ate and we talked about what are we going to do? And we're going to tell him. And of course, my older sister was like, I'll do it. And we went back in the room, just the four of us after lunch. Sorry. And she walked up to him and she said, Daddy, are you ready to see Jesus? And he looked up at us with his big, beautiful crystal blue eyes. And he said, I think I am. And she said, all right, then let's go see Jesus. And from that moment on, we all said our goodbyes. We all told him what an incredible dad and grandfather he was. And each person took a turn. And we stood with him. And they came in and turned the medicine off that was keeping his heart functioning. They had assured us that they would administer morphine. We didn't want him to feel any pain or anything. And they said no. All the nurses, the doctors, everybody had fallen in love with him. Like he was going to be taken very good care of, and he was. And so we just sat with him and we played music and we prayed and we laughed and we talked. And shortly after them turning the medication off, he fell asleep. And so then we just sat with him until I want to say probably 7:30-ish is when, having a daughter that's a nurse, she was watching the numbers. And so when it got really close, she was like, Mom, it's time. And so we stood around him and played his favorite songs and held his hand and just reassured him that Mom would be very well taken care of, that we were all okay. Each sibling basically said, hey, I'm fine. And then our spouses went around and said, hey, we've got Courtney or Bridget or whatever. Just every person, we assured him every person is taken care of by name because we knew that would matter to him.
He had nothing to worry about. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he just fell asleep. And
Friday night.
it was about 7:30 something, I think, when he finally took his last breath. Listening to one of his favorite songs, they loved Brooks and Dunn. And they loved the song Letters in Red. And actually, deep into my mom's Alzheimer's disease, if you played that song, she could remember those words.
Wow.
She would sing that song. I have video of her singing that song.
That's amazing.
And so that's the song that was playing when he took his last breath.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your mom didn't know this was going on. Y'all
No.
at this point. Yeah.
No, she had no idea. She probably knew he was absent physically, but the nursing home was on it. And
Yeah.
they were very much keeping her very close and taking care of her. And so we decided after he passed that we would not tell her. We would not say Daddy died.
And did she ever ask about him?
She didn't, which we thought was interesting, but we didn't hear her asking for him. The workers at the nursing home said she's not asking for him because he's here. And so that's a whole other story.
Before you moved to your mom, will you share what happened with the nurse? Was it with your dad, Nicole?
Yes. So I'll back up even further. I don't even know if I've told you this story, but when Daddy broke his hip, he did well with the surgery. He came out. COVID was ramping up again. And so they sent him back to his nursing home pretty quickly after hip surgery, quicker than we thought. But they were like, look, it's safer because of COVID to get him out of this hospital and get him over there. He started having these dizzy episodes, this heart racing situation. And so he was in his wheelchair. Now, this is post hip surgery. He's sitting in his wheelchair. He reaches for his phone. He has a dizzy spell. He falls. He hits his head. My sister gets the first call, and then she calls me and says, Daddy has fallen out of his wheelchair. He's hit his head. He's en route, and they don't think he's going to make it. You need to come. So we packed it up, flew over to Lake Charles as fast as we could get there because they were convinced he was not going to survive. And surely there was brain damage, like all the things. They run all the tests, and it ended up being just a really bad laceration on his head. He had no concussion, no anything. But they kept him in ICU because he kept having these heart arrhythmias. And so I get there one day and he was very disturbed. And he says, Jesus came. And I was like, okay. And he said, I'm not ready to go. So he started explaining what he had experienced. And he said the ceiling opened and all of his siblings were there. His mom and dad were there. And they were telling him, come on, baby Jack, we're waiting for you. And he said, Jesus was off in the distance. And he said, and I told him, no, I can't come yet. I'm not done. He said, so I begged him, let me stay because I have to take care of Joanne. And he was so disturbed by the dream though. And I said, Daddy, why are you so like crying, like really upset? And I said, what's disturbing about that? And he said, I'm scared. I'm not ready. I'm scared. And so I was able to spend that time ministering to him and just saying, you don't have anything to be scared of. And he kept saying, but I haven't finished my job. My job is to take care of Joanne. He can't take me because I have to keep taking care of her. And I told him, I was like, Daddy, we're going to take care of him. And he kept saying there was a pile. There was a pile of junk. There was a pile of junk. And Scott was in the room with me. And Scott said, Mr. Jack, what if the junk is all the things you're holding on to that you need to let go of? And he was like, that may be it. But here's what's crazy, Cassie, is he kept saying there was a little boy. And so at that point, our first grandson wasn't very old. And he was like, maybe it was him. And he was like going, and I was like, no, because he's alive. Who would have been this little boy in heaven with the other siblings? And so he told the story to me, to my sisters. I recorded him telling the story. I reminded him that Jesus loved him and that he didn't have to work to get to heaven, that accepting Jesus was his ticket to heaven. You know who Jesus is. You have taught all of us well, all the things that you would want to minister to someone who really he was afraid. He was afraid of dying and he didn't want to go. He didn't, of course, because he lived another year. And so in that time frame, though, we could not figure out who was this little boy. Well, my dad was very heavily into genealogy and he had done all of this research. So my sister has it all on my daddy's iPad and she went back and she looked. And when she looked, we realized there was another baby boy born somewhere before my dad was born. So somewhere in the birth of the 8 children, I want to say it was like number 4 or 5, there was another baby born. And all we can tell from genealogy is he potentially was stillborn or died shortly after birth, but because he was born and died on the same day, but it was a male.
Wow.
I know. We were like, what in the world? And that was the first of many moments that God orchestrated in preparing my dad for passing.
I love the Lord so much because you've mentioned how he worried a lot. And it was like God was, like you just said, preparing him with such kindness and love towards your dad that it wasn't just this abrupt thing that
Yeah.
it was like he prepared him.
Mhm.
And with your mom, which I know you're going to share, she didn't have to live without him for
No,
that long.
no. And what was crazy is at this time, they had just moved into this new facility. And so they had not really been there very long when he broke his hip for dad to know how well taken care of she was with the other caregivers that were there.
So good.
And so anyway, so fast forward that Friday morning that daddy passed, my sister had gotten in from California and I walk in and it was just the 2 of them in the room and she had turned his bed to look out of the window. And the only thing that you could see out of his window was just this treetops and a cross from a church, a steeple from a church. And it was a cross. And it was just a beautiful day, beautiful view. And she had turned him to look out and they were chatting. And I walked in. And shortly after I walked in, this girl walks in and she's mopping and mopping all around the bed and everything else. And what I didn't know is she had already come in once before and she did some things. And my sister told me that the minute she walked in, my dad like fixed his eyes on her and did not stop watching her. Well, she comes in and she does something and she leaves. I enter the room. Now she's back and she's mopping and doing some things again. Now, mind you, we're in ICU. There's not a whole lot to really do in ICU. And now she's back a second time. And my dad fixes his eyes on her again. And she comes around his bed and he looks at her and he goes, "What's your name?" And she says, "Nicole." And he said, "Do I know you?" And she said, "You will in your future." And she walked out. And Daddy was very hard of hearing. He has been, my God, I don't even remember him not being hard of hearing, to be honest. And my sister and I just froze. And she goes, "I have chills everywhere." I was like, "Me too. What just happened?" He never said, "What'd she say?" That would have been the comment he would have made. "What'd she say? Who was that?" He heard everything she said very clearly. And she disappeared, Cassie, and we never laid eyes on her again the rest of that day. And at last conversation with my sister, she had called the hospital. Nobody knows who Nicole is. And we felt it when she said those words and she left the room. You could feel the presence in that room. And I just was like, she's here to get him. She's here to get him. And for her to say that, "You will in your future," like, what?
And for him to have peace, knowing like he had peace with that.
Yeah.
Like you said, he would have typically asked,
Yeah.
but he had peace.
Complete peace. Complete peace. And so,
That's incredible.
oh, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
So then I'm going to segue a little bit.
Yeah,
So
go
then
ahead.
this starts the process, obviously, of you grieving your dad. You have a new grandbaby. So you're navigating that joy, which I had to do with my dad and Selah being born.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to navigate,
Yeah.
holding joy and grief at the same time.
Yeah.
And then your mom unexpectedly passed 3 months later, not even.
Yeah. It was so Daddy was day after Thanksgiving. And like you said, it was joy of a new baby. And then we're going into the Christmas holiday. All the kids are coming home. It was an unfair set of emotions because how do you enjoy anything when you are so broken and heartbroken? And I really never gave, I guess you just don't, the weight of the physical presence of your parents. Even though Daddy was ornery sometimes and we would argue, and even though Mom had Alzheimer's for 15 plus years and I had not really had a solid mother-daughter conversation with her in so many years, it's the physical presence of them, especially my daddy. That was what really, man, that hit so hard. And so getting through Christmas was difficult. It was after Christmas that I think the grief really hit because I was able to stay so busy at Christmas. And because all the kids were home, it was all about help Mom stay happy, help Mom stay busy. Like they knew how bad I was grieving. And I never shied away from that, especially with my kids, with anybody really.
I'm glad you're sharing this.
Yeah.
I thought about this on the way over, like do you have to help your kids because they're grieving too? Or what did that look like? If you want to share just for a second on that.
No, I did. They were all present when he took his final breaths. Every one of my children was standing in the room when my daddy died. And so I questioned each one of them individually. Do you have questions about what you saw? If you need to talk to a counselor, like you say the word. And so
I'm glad you didn't shy away.
no, I wanted them to also realize standing in that room, holding that man's hand, we were standing on holy ground. To be able to stand in the presence of somebody passing from this earth and opening their eyes in eternity, to be able to be part of that, which I know not everybody gets that opportunity when people pass, was such a gift.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that we all recognize that gift, but also it's very fair to be angry, to be mad, to be sad, to be like lost. And that's how I felt. And I very quickly let my children know I am lost. I am not the mom you had 2 days ago.
And you got to just give me space and you got to let me be. And I may be snappy. And I promise you, it's not coming from a place of me. You have no idea maybe what I dealt with in the morning. And I'm going to very quickly apologize. Like, I'm just sorry. And so, what I did with my kids is I also told them I will not apologize for how bad I'm hurting. I will apologize if I react based on my feelings in an inappropriate way, like I snap at you or something like that. But I won't apologize that there are days that I don't want to get out of bed. I'm not going to apologize that I really don't care that it's Christmas and I don't feel like Christmas shopping. This Christmas may not look the way it used to look, and I don't care.
Yeah.
And they were like totally cool with that. They were
Yeah.
like, Mom, you do what you need to do. And I was very honest with them. Y'all can feel all those ways as well. He was a large presence in all of our lives, very close to everybody, and had special instructions and advice for every single one of them. Every single one of them took a nugget away from him in his final hours. And
So cool.
yeah, it was
What kind of
fantastic.
man that he is.
Yeah, he was a leader until the minute he closed his eyes. And
So you're still in the middle of it.
oh, yeah, and really deep in the middle of it because, like I said, I feel like it was after Christmas when the holidays ended, life got back to normal. It was when life got back to normal that I was like, what has hit me? That was when grief really hit. And I didn't want to do things that I normally do. You know me, Cassie. I'm like a yes girl. I'm doing all the things. I've got my podcast. I'm always doing something.
You have a
And
whole farm here.
yeah, I've got the animals. And really, that was all I could do. And like me getting up, I normally get up and get dressed and I'm just flitting around all the time. And it was like, okay, I'm up. I'm not getting dressed. I don't care if I haven't washed my hair. I'm going to go hang out with my animals. I would just go sit out with the animals and they bring such peace. People are like, how do you have so many animals? Because they are so healing and they are so wonderful. And so I would just go sit with them and I would cry with them. Like my mama goat, she knows. Sits by me. I know the listeners are probably like, did she just say goat?
And
I
she
did.
won't tell anybody your secrets.
She will not. She will not. And I don't know if you know this, but horses know there's like a certain distance that a horse can tell your emotions before you even approach the animal.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how intuitive horses are. So I would go out there and I would just love on him. And so anyway, I I was deep in the grief, and I had decided at that point it was okay to not be okay and to not do all the things.
Yeah.
And so I put the podcast on hold indefinitely because it was a new year. This is my verse for the year. And I was like, verse, I didn't want to go to church. Not because I didn't want to be in the presence of the Lord, because I knew emotionally I was going to be a wreck. And so I knew that I had to do that different for just a minute.
That's good because also it was when you go to church, it's like you have to pour out too. Like it feels, at least tell me if this was your experience. My experience is I don't have the capacity to just go be around anyone. Like, you
Right.
can be around the animals because you don't have to respond. They're not asking you.
Yeah, they're not expecting any.
I don't have anything to give. And
Yeah.
it almost feels sometimes to me like if I'm going to go be around other people, I'm having to give something, even with my own kids. Like
Yeah.
yesterday, I'm like, I need 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't love you. It's not because of anything, but you have got to give me this because I need it with
Yeah.
Jesus. I just need it with Jesus right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And
I
that's-
locked the door. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm a closet. I hang out in the closet. Nobody can find me. That's how it was. And like I said, it wasn't that I didn't want to go to church. I couldn't tell you how I was doing because I wasn't. I just wasn't. I wasn't okay. I wasn't doing. I really didn't want to be told I'm so sorry because I knew that everybody that loved me was so sorry.
And you already had to deal with that all December.
Yeah, people were showing up. People were loving me. That people were praying. I didn't have to question if any of that was happening behind the scenes. They were doing it, but I couldn't look at people and go, "Oh, I'm doing good," because I wasn't. And then when I would say, I'm not doing good," then it was, now I'm just a blubbering mess. And I just want to do that at home where I'm
Yeah.
safe, and because the tears come in the most random times, the most odd things elicit this reaction. And yeah, deep in the grief. And I actually had told Scott, because Scott lost his dad 29 years ago. And I just kept saying, am I ever going to not be sad? What if I'm not ever not sad? And he was like, you're going to not be sad. It'll be okay. Thank God he could hold me up through all of that. And so I finally really started feeling better. I was like, okay, today doesn't feel so heavy. And I took each day like that. If I woke up and I was like, ooh, today's heavy, I just let it be heavy. I just let it be what it was. And I had no expectations of myself, which is completely contrary to my personality, but I just did it. There were lots of days that I picked Hamilton up from school, and normally I would be dressed and happy to chat with other moms, or we're going to go run an errand. And I was a mess. And I would pick him up and he would just look at me and go, "You okay, mom?" And he's 13. And there were some days that I was like, "Yep, I've just cried all day today. I miss Pop Pop, but I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I can be sad and be okay." And my God, as a mom, be vulnerable with your kids, because you are, in a weird way, you are elevating them in your weakness to minister to you. And that feels good for them. And that's exactly what I did for my kids, all the way down to the 13-year-old. Let him minister to me. Let him reach over and grab my hand and remind me, Pop Up's in a better place. Jesus loves him and he loves you.
I haven't thought about it like that before. Like actually doing that on purpose, like letting your kids, like you said, elevate them to minister to you on purpose. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And then also it's teaching them too.
Yeah.
You know, it's teaching them when they face grief one day to let themselves feel it and for that to be okay.
Yeah. Everybody knows somebody that's passed. Everybody's experienced that. You probably have experienced it in your own home. And one of the things that so many people were telling me, people sending me cards, sending me devotionals, sending me text messages, was, Courtney, don't shy away. Feel all the ways you need to feel, because you have to go through it to get through it. And don't go around it, because it'll come back. Like, you will ultimately deal with this loss. And so I wanted to make sure that I went through it as best as I could. Is this going to come back? Sure. It's going to continue to remind me, but I want to make sure I've gone through it and not try to, find my way through it.
Yeah.
Because that's really what I'm really good at. I'm really good at putting that mask on and being like, I'm good. This is fine. He's with Jesus. I love Jesus. Everything's great. No, it's not great. I can love Jesus. I can know where my mama and daddy are. This doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't feel great. Even though I know the promises, it doesn't take away the reality of the loss.
Right.
And the way that feels.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure that I honored that.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to know the rest of the story, but not be okay in the present story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I tried to model for my children. That's just how I've been living and how I'm going to continue to live. So anyway, fast forward, I'm actually waking up this particular week and I'm feeling better. And that Friday, I had all the plans ready to go. I had worked all week long. The podcast was going to relaunch. I had everybody in a queue to send an email out for podcast invites for me to start interviewing people. And we ran to go get an early dinner. And I was like, okay, in my mind, I'm like, when I get home, I'm going to hit send on that email. I had not hit send on the email. I'm going to hit send on the email. And I was at dinner and my sister called. And she said, something's not right with mom. I was like, what are you talking about? We knew mom had Alzheimer's, but aside from her memory, healthy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, she hasn't been eating much this week. And this is Friday. I came on Thursday and I brought her a milkshake and she wouldn't drink it. And that was like, normally my mom loved a milkshake. And she said, so I came today and she said, Courtney, she's closing her mouth and refusing to eat. And she said, I think you need to come. And this was Friday.
Beginning of February.
This was the last day of January. My daddy's birthday is February 6th. So we were gearing up for what the next week was going to look like, because it was daddy's birthday and he had just died. And she said, I think you need to get here. And so I left and I went to Lake Charles and she was so weak. And we talked to her. She responded very little. And the doctor came in and she was like, he wants her home for his birthday. And
The doctor said this.
and we were like, yeah, we knew it. My sister had said it already. She was like, daddy's birthday's next week. And I think he's calling her home. And then the doctor said the same thing. And when I got there and saw how literally 67 days before when daddy died on Friday, we went on Saturday, all the siblings, to love on our mama. And she was just as healthy and happy. And we didn't tell her that daddy had passed. We just loved her and talked to her. And she didn't ask any questions. She didn't ask where he was or anything like that. And we left it. And we made a decision as siblings that we would not look at her and say, Daddy's gone. That we knew she would know
Yeah.
without us speaking the words. And so that Saturday, she wouldn't eat, she wouldn't respond. And we sat with her and talked to her. And every now and then she'd nod. We just kept making sure are you in any pain? And she would tell us no. And so on Sunday, at one point, we got her to wake just a little bit. And I asked her, I said, Mom, is Dad here? And she said, yes. And I said, he loves you so much. And she said, and I love him too. And that was the last word she spoke. And so we sat with her all night Sunday. And when we left Sunday night, because they wouldn't let us spend the night, they said, we don't think she's going to pass in the next few hours. Y'all go get some rest. If anything changes, like we'll call. And we were just around the corner. And as we were leaving, I told the girls that were sitting there, I said, y'all watch her. And they were like, oh, we're not leaving her. We're not leaving baby Joe, because that's what he called her. And I said, Daddy would have never left if he had not known that y'all were taking very good care of her. And the lady started laughing. She goes, oh, and he's here. She talks to him all the time. And I said, wait, what? So I went back and I sat down and I said, what did you say? And she said, oh, yeah. She said the night that he passed, so that would have been that Friday night, they shared a room, but they had their own beds, and it was separated by their bathroom. So it was like a bed and then a little hallway with the bathroom and then his bed. She was in the back of the room so that if she wandered, he could call for help. And that night that he had passed, they heard her talking and they were like, oh no, she's getting out of bed. And they went to go check on her, and she was sitting up in her bed, completely coherent. And she was talking to my dad, and she was telling him, I'm fine, Jack. And I know you're fine. We're going to be okay. And the lady said, Miss Joanne, who are you talking to? And she said, Jack, he's right here. And they were like, okay. And she continued to do that. Like they were eating lunch one day and they were feeding her, and she was talking to him. And she was like, I want that dress right there, Jack. And they said every time she would enter into a conversation with him, she was completely coherent. Like at this point, you could talk to mama if you asked questions like, how are you feeling? Good. Are you hungry? Like she would respond to your questions, but she wasn't prompting a conversation anymore. And they were like, she is totally coherent and having conversations with him. And so we know he's here. And so that was on Sunday night. And then on Monday, I was able to sit with her by myself for many hours, and we prayed, and we had made a playlist for Daddy's funeral. And so I started to play their favorite songs for her. And on Tuesday, again, kids came in, said their final goodbyes. And on Tuesday morning, we were sitting with her, and it was just my sister and I, one of my girls, and my niece. It was just the four of us in the room. The men were all in the waiting room, and she began to slow her breath. And we called my brother. My sister from California couldn't even make it in for this. And we called my brother, and we were like, you need to come. It's getting close. And I'll never forget it. My brother looks and sounds like my dad. Oh my gosh, it's just amazing. And he walked in as we were standing with her. And when he walked in the room, instead of saying, Mama, what are you doing here? He walked in, he grabbed her hand, and he said, Joanne, why are you still here? It's time to go home. She took 2 breaths. But here's what's crazy. Not only, it was like my daddy entered the room. My brother would have never called my mother Joanne. But she was listening to the same Brooks and Dunn song. when she took her last breath. And it was just like, what in the world? And then we realized they had been married 67 years and they lived apart 67 days. And so she died on a Tuesday. And we buried her on Daddy's birthday on Thursday.
I don't have words, Courtney. It speaks for itself.
Yeah.
You can see God's hand in all of it, even through the such pain.
Yeah.
The hardships, all of it. You see his hand in it.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the verses that the parable that Daddy and I would go round and round about was Jesus leaves the 99 for the one. Daddy used to tell me, Courtney, Jesus would leave the 99 and he'd go after the one. And we would go round and round about it because sometimes I was like, quit throwing that in my face. Because sometimes when you're dealing with a child that's battling struggles, the hardest thing we have to do sometimes is complete surrender. And oftentimes when I was in a surrender moment, my daddy was in a no fight moment. Go after him. And so we would go back and forth and I would say, Daddy, the one has to want to be found too. And he doesn't want to be found right now. And I have to be at peace with that. I have to be at peace that Jesus is going after the one, not me.
That's good.
And so this was like our battle. I remember calling my sisters one time and telling them, you call your father, because he wasn't my father anymore. You call your father and you tell him that if he calls me and tells me Jesus leaves the 99 and goes after the one more time, I am cutting him off. I will not speak to him ever again. And they were like, okay. So they were like the mediators between me and Daddy. And so anyway, at Daddy's funeral, he died on a Friday. We did not go there expecting him to pass. So we had to come back to Texas, get all the funeral clothes together and go back. And that Sunday that we're like scrambling to get everything ready, Scott calls me and he goes, hey, Hamilton wants to wear his school uniform, which was his khaki pants and a blazer. He has to wear a tie and everything for his formal days for school. And I was like, I don't care. I really don't care. And so Tuesday morning is the funeral and Hamilton has his uniform or his suit on. And he walks up to me and he goes, Mom, this was in my pocket. And he pulls out a sticker of a lamb and it says, Jesus leaves the 99 for the one. And I was like, okay. Okay. Just remarkable. And after he broke his hip, my sister gave him a devotional. And he kept telling her, I've been reading that book you gave me. And the night that he died, or the next day when we went to the nursing home to see my mom, I said, where's Daddy's devotional? I want to see what he was reading. What was his last reading? And it was about preparing a place for you.
Wow.
And so I read that at his funeral. And so it's just like all of those little things. And I think that if we had not been acutely aware of how God was showing up, we would have missed it. And especially like just the sticker, Nicole walking in the room, the devotional, what was the last thing he read? All those just little moments and the moments that happened between after his death and then Mama's death, like Cassie, it's been crazy. I had to start documenting them. Even us just sitting down right now when Mama died and when you've done a funeral 67 days ago and now you've got to go do another one, we had to go pick all the things out. And one of the things that you pick out is little scripture cards or encouraging cards that they leave that people can take. And so when we were picking out Mom's, immediately it's the 4 siblings and there was one with a hummingbird on it. And we were like, oh, that's Mom. Absolutely. No questions asked. My sister in California couldn't make it in. And we all agreed that we wanted Mama buried on Daddy's birthday. So it happened very quickly. She was there on FaceTime. Thank God for technology. But she has a little garden right outside of her door. And just a week later, she was like, y'all are not going to believe this, but I have a nest of hummingbirds and they're right outside my door. And so we were like, oh, we believe it. But you and I just sat down to have this. And there was a tissue box up here that was left in this house. We've been in this house 3 years. And you and I are sitting up in what used to be an attic that the previous owner turned into a room. And so we've just recently been like cleaning it out. And there's actually still some of his stuff that's been up here because it's just been we'll get to it one
Yeah.
day kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there was a box of tissues. And I kept them because they're half full. So I'm like, this is a good box of tissues. So when we sat down and I was like, I better grab some tissues. I'm going to cry. And I grabbed the box and set it down. There's hummingbirds
All over it.
all over this box of tissues. And when I looked up, there's like one staring right at me. And I was like, okay, Mom, I see you.
And it's, you mentioned the promises of God and how you believe them and everything earlier. And it's like one of the ones of him being with us in our he comforts the brokenhearted.
Yeah.
It's a promise. He comforts the brokenhearted. And it's in those little things that if we don't shut out God and we are listening like you're doing and paying attention, we'll see it because it's him speaking to us and comforting us. And it's like when I went to text you after your mom passed, because you kept me updated through text message of your dad and your mom, I felt strongly just at the end of a short little message I sent to you to put a purple heart.
Yeah.
I don't normally send purple hearts. It's a pink or a red. So I had to go find the purple heart and I sent it. And then you right away said that purple was the color y'all were wearing at your mom's funeral that day.
I asked you, when you sent that, we were getting dressed, ready to leave. And so we all wore red for Daddy's funeral. That was his favorite color. And he loved when my mom either wore red or purple. And so we're like, we don't want to wear red again. And we're going to go with purple for Mom. And so we were all getting dressed. I was in my sister's room and that text came through from you. And I looked at her and I said, my friend just sent this. I think you just said, hey, praying for you today. I was like, with a purple heart. And I questioned you. I was like, why did you send a purple heart?
And
you
I
were like,
told you because I felt the Lord telling me to. I don't know why.
Yeah. And I was like, purple is for Alzheimer's. And that was the color that we were wearing.
And I had no idea
Either.
either one of those things. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of little moments of just God saying, you're not alone. And they're not alone. They're not alone.
What a beautiful story that they have in their marriage, just how they took care of each other, how they loved each other, how you guys have loved them and honored them, and just seeing God throughout it all, from the littlest of things to the big things. Everybody, we might have mentioned this, but everyone is either currently grieving, has grieved, or will grieve. And you've just said so many things about that I know are encouraging to people, just about God being with us in it. And to not shut him out, even God, just don't shut him out in our grief.
Yeah.
Even if it's just like keeping that, I thought of that on the way over, just keeping that conversation open with him. And it's not, I know everybody grieves differently, and it can be the loss of a loved one. It can be, I know people are listening that are grieving a parent that's still alive, like my mom, the long goodbye with Alzheimer's and dementia with her parents, or another friend that listens, her dad's dying of cancer and she feels like she's grieving him already. People grieve so many different things. But I think it's really special if we just keep that conversation line between God open so we don't miss out on all those little things that help us in the middle of it.
Yeah. Because that was my mom's story. And I really felt like in the process of knowing that my parents were going to die, I mean, they were 88 and 90. I had plenty of years with my parents. And I used to think, gosh, I'm so blessed that I have had them so much longer than a lot of people have their parents. Scott's dad died at 55. And just looking at that, looking the years that I had with my parents versus what he had. And so I think I set myself up in a lot of ways. This is not going to be that hard because of all the years I've had with them. And then my mom, because of Alzheimer's, I felt that way too. Like I've been grieving her absence for years. And you get okay with it when you can't pick up the phone and call your mom for advice anymore. You're okay with it because it's been so many years that you couldn't do those things. But none of it, Cassie, prepared me. Like you can say all the things I've had all these years. I've been saying goodbye for a long time. But it's the physical absence. It's the finality of it that it will impact you no matter how prepared you think you are. And I remember actually I immediately went to my counselor because I was like, this is bad. I didn't know I could be this sad. And I said, I almost feel a little selfish though, to be this sad. This was between Mama and Dad dying. So Daddy had just died. And I was like, I feel bad because I'm living with a man whose daddy died at 55. And I'm grieving a man who died at 90. And she looked at me and she said, you're not grieving. You're grieving the 50 years of a relationship you've had with him. And it doesn't matter. Don't sell yourself short and don't feel like you have to make excuses for how horrible this feels. It's okay to feel as sad as you feel. You won't stay like this forever. And that was the other thing. I knew how sad I was. I knew I didn't want to stay like that forever. And so I also knew immediately that I needed to be talking to somebody. My counselor was on speed dial.
That's good advice.
That I need to be hashing this out with somebody. And I had to be really honest with my husband too. I am not okay. And in different ways. Like, you can hold me because I'm crying and I'm so sad, but don't be coming at me trying to love on me right now. I don't have that kind of energy. I don't have that kind of energy. And I don't know what I want to eat. Oh my gosh, how can making a food decision be so hard? Impossible.
I think that's important too for anyone listening. Just if you know somebody grieving, to bring them meals, to send them a DoorDash gift card, to be understanding if they just need a minute, if they don't want to be loved on right now, if they don't want to be touched, if they don't have anything to give you, to be understanding towards them and offer them that grace and know that it's not personal. They love you. They still think the same about you, but they just need the space to heal.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that of course, I've interviewed other people going through grief journeys. I know people who've gone through grief. I've experienced it with in-laws and other friends and things like that. But when it hits you personally, you don't really know what you need. I couldn't look at my husband, who knows me better than anybody, and say, you know what, if we did this, or if I ate this, or I went here, I would feel better.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell him that. So just feed me. Just give me food. If you put it in front of me, my body knows I need to eat.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you if I want a hamburger or a taco. I think it's those things. Just show up, because it matters so much. The cards that I got, like handwritten cards, people have done away with that, right? You don't send cards anymore. Those mattered so much. The text messages from people. And after the fact, this wasn't, of course, you're getting text all around it, but it's like these random notes that I get every now and then. I just got one last week from a girl that was like, I was just thinking about you today and I was praying for you.
It's don't forget to reach out to the person, even if it's been months. If God has put them on your heart, reach out to them, because that's for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's anything, right? It doesn't have to be because they're grieving.
Right.
When the Holy Spirit prompts you that you need to reach out to somebody, don't miss the prompting.
Yeah.
Do it because there's a reason and they need it. Because I am better, quote unquote, now. I'm functioning day to day better. Every day isn't, oh my God, I've lost my parents. But just, what's today? Today's Monday.
May 5th.
Yeah. Saturday morning, I woke up and everything is about Mother's Day right now.
Yes.
And the tears just wouldn't stop. And Scott was like, how do I help? And I was like, you can't. Everything's about Mother's Day. And I wasn't prepared to not have my mother on Mother's Day. And then I feel like I'm going to come up from air and it's going to be Father's Day.
Yeah.
Like, people don't do that at the same time. I know this is a little unique.
Yeah.
So I'm really having to give myself a lot of grace and be okay.
Yeah.
Not being okay.
Sometimes it is just make it to the next day, the next moment.
Yeah.
For me, those first couple of years were the hardest after my dad. Now we're coming up on year 5. It'll be 5 years in August.
Oh, wow.
It's different. It looks different now.
Yeah.
But there are moments, like you said, where I really miss him. And it seems for me to be around his birthday, his favorite time of the year, certain holidays.
Or when things happen. The other day, something happened and I was like, oh my God, I got to send this to Daddy. He would think it's so funny.
I was going to say, I normally ask a fun question at the end of the podcast, but I'm going to do it different this time. And sometimes we just have to let it out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My eyes will never be the same.
Yeah.
I'm like, gosh, where did all those bags and wrinkles come from?
Ever since I started having kids, I was told twice the other day, it's real. I literally have wrinkles I never had before kids and grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
The best blessings are family. And that's why we hurt so much, because we love so much.
Yeah.
I thought of that a lot after my dad died. I hurt so much because of how much I love.
Yeah. You just feel protected when your earthly father is here. And you know you have a heavenly Father that protects you the same way, which is so comforting.
Yeah.
And so that's how I was. That's how it was with my dad. Yeah. I was so protected. And with my mom, I was so loved.
Yeah.
And so the thought of knowing that kind of love, knowing that kind of protection, and knowing that's how our Heavenly Father loves and protects us exponentially more than that, really remarkable to think
Mhm.
of.
I thought it sounded selfish of myself to say it, but I know it's not. But there were times where I missed getting gifts from my dad.
Yeah.
Like he was so generous and would just give me gifts. And I'm like, I miss getting a birthday card and a gift from him. And it's not because I need the money or whatever, but I just miss that. And
Yeah.
I'm thankful I kept cards that have his name on it.
Yeah.
It is like our protection, that love that your dad has, a daddy has for his daughter,
Yeah.
for that not to be here anymore
Yeah.
is really hard.
Yeah, it is.
And my relationship with the Lord has changed in the sense that I would always call my dad and his mom in the car. And now I don't have that because they're both gone. I know I've told you this before.
Yeah.
So I've tried to press into the Lord more and just go to him.
The car. That was the hardest place for me to be after my daddy died, was the car. Because like I said earlier, he was hard of hearing and I've got people around me all the time. And so I'd call him when I was in the car by myself because then I could talk really loud and he could talk really loud.
Yeah.
And that's where we had all of our chats,
Yeah.
is anytime I was in the car. And so initially following his passing, I could not be in the car by myself. And so I told my family, I
Yeah.
don't want to be in the car by myself.
Yeah.
So they would either drive me or they would ride with me. And because the few times that I was by myself were
Too
some of the
much.
hardest. Yeah. Of just the silence of not being able to just pick up that phone. And that was when I would catch him up on everything happening over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything, I'm not going to ask you the fun question I usually ask. You shared Havana's, who you'd sit down with on the last episode that you were
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But what I do want to do is just share something and invite you to share anything if there's anything else that you want to say. But something that you shared to me about your dad months ago when I was in a season struggling with parenting with my own son was school related, but advice that he gave
Yeah.
that has really helped me. And then if you want to share anything else as we close, I'm going to let you do that. But you told me that your dad used to always tell y'all that you could eat a whole elephant if you chop it up into bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
And so I've used that when it comes to reading. My son has struggled a little bit with reading fluency. And I would cover all the words but one. And I would tell him that in other areas as well. You can eat this whole elephant. You can do this whole thing if we just look at one word at a time. If we chop it up into bite-sized pieces. And I've applied it to many areas. But I love, love, love that advice that your dad gave.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to share about either one of your parents as we close?
Daddy used to always say, Court, you can eat an elephant if you cut him up in small enough pieces. And that was actually some of the advice that he gave one of the kids his last hours. And so what he meant by that is if you take anything and you break it down and you just take one little step, one little piece at a time, before you know it, you can conquer and you can do anything. And I think I told you this
It's such good advice.
I know, when you told me I'm working on a children's book. That was where God led me immediately after my dad dying, is this is a children's book. And what's funny is my mom loved elephants. So my mom has a huge collection of elephants. Like anytime we had any kind of occasion, I know
have chills too. That's one of my favorite animals. I didn't know your mom loved elephants.
My mama loved elephants. And so anyway, so I'm working on that because, and I think grief is just that. You can get through grief if you cut it up into small pieces, if you take it in small steps and you don't shy away from each part of it. And that, like you said, with reading, it's with anything.
It's how I clean my pantry out.
Yeah. You can do, look, this isn't some new concept. It's just the visual of it and being able to go, okay, this feels like a really big elephant right now. Feels really heavy. If you think of an elephant, their stature and their presence are so large. And so if you came up against one, you would be like, wow, I'm really overshadowed by this. But as you begin to work through things one piece at a time, it takes this big, massive animal and makes it very, I guess, doable.
Mhm.
So that was some of Daddy's. Daddy was always full of lots of wise cracks and little humorous things that he would say. But that was definitely one of those things that I think will stick with us forever. And my kids, anytime my kids are facing something, I've always told them. And even more so now, I'm like, don't forget what Pop said.
Mhm.
He used to always say, plan your work and work your plan. It was one of the other pieces of advice he gave one of the girls. Plan your work and work your plan. And again, it goes back to that elephant. It may look big, but you can do anything if you put your mind to it. That was another one. Another little piece of advice from Daddy. Think before you speak. Think before you speak. And so you do ask, who would you want to sit down with? And last time I said Havana, and you would think that at the end of this podcast, I would say, I want to sit down with my mom and dad one more time. But that would be real selfish, because their job is no longer here. It's in heaven. And I'm actually at peace with that. And so I think for me right now, if I answered, who would you want to sit down with, living or dead? I haven't had a mom in a really long time because of the Alzheimer's. It stole my mom a long time ago. And her physical absence was more tender than my dad's, because a piece of you there's something about a mama. And there was a protection that I felt over her in her passing. It just felt different. It felt different for my siblings and I. And we said it that day. We wanted very much to protect her and to carry her to Jesus. And we did. We got the opportunity to do that with her as well. Be there on that holy ground. And so what has struck me about her physical absence is a burning desire to be present for other moms who have lost their mom, other moms who maybe don't have a relationship with their mom. And so I think if I said, who do you want to sit down with? I want to sit down with the other mom who says, I can't call my mom anymore for advice because she has Alzheimer's, or because she's passed away, or maybe I never had a good relationship with her. I want to be that mentor or that mom for somebody else, because I realized in my mom's passing that I'm not alone in the longing for a mother to be present.
That's so good. So good. Because a lot of people do need that and want that and desire that and don't know where to find it.
Yeah. So that's who I'd sit down with. I'd sit down with the girl that says, I just need somebody to be a mom for a minute.
Where can I put your information where people can find you and reach out if they do need that? What's your information? I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, of course, you can always find me at my website, which is CourtneyDoyleMinistries.com. And then I'm predominantly, as far as social media, I'm either on Instagram, which is Courtney Doyle _8, or Facebook, Courtney Doyle Ministries. I just started a Facebook group too, called Mom 101.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's it. So if they type in Mom 101.
101.
Okay.
Yep.
And then Courtney, for those of you who don't know, has a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Masquerade of Motherhood.
Well,
the Mom
actually,
Show.
The Mom Show, yeah. The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. I changed the name so it'd be easier for people to find.
Okay, awesome.
But the mom part does stand for Masquerade of Motherhood.
Yes.
And yeah, this season we're ramped back up on our shows, and we're doing Help, I'm a Mom Who. And so moms are filling in the blanks. Maybe you're a mom who's grieving. Maybe you're a mom who's had trauma. Maybe you're a mom who's just, these kids are driving me crazy. That's who we're talking to.
And I
all the
know
moms.
people are going to wonder, because you mentioned the children's book. Do you already have a timeline of when that potentially could be out?
I don't. I just actually hired a book coach for my other book that needs to be finished. And they have a publishing company. And so I potentially am going to pitch it to them. But
So stay tuned.
yeah, stay tuned. It's
Maybe the
on
best.
it's on the horizon. That will probably come out versus the book that I've been writing since 2017.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying yes. You
Of
honor
course.
your parents both so well. I know that they're smiling, and it's just amazing to hear. So I really appreciate and praise God for you with your saying yes, with giving me a resounding yes, and for sharing in the middle of it what you've been through and just getting to hear more about your parents. So thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate you. I wouldn't have done this with anybody else.
Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers, and in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.